الله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا الله ذكرا كثيرا وسبحوه بكرة وأصيلا هو الذي يصلي عليكم وملائكته ليخرجكم من الظلمات إلى النور وكان بالمؤمنين رحيما تحيتهم يوم يلقونه سلام وأعد لهم أجرا كريما صدق الله العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Surah Ahzab, the previous set of ayat that we did, especially the last ayat that we did last night, ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن رسول الله وخاتم النبيين وكان الله بكل شيء عليما. This ayah is one of the greatest in the honors of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because this clearly establishes that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the seal of prophethood and the prophet of all prophets as well. The next set of ayat in the middle is addressed to believers, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has further elaborated in this surah the virtues of the person of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Here in the middle, the command is for the believers to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the person of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, those people who have believed, who have brought faith, udhkurullaha dhikran kathira. Here the meaning is that remember Allah excessively, abundantly, and the connection from behind and forward is that because we have given you the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a way of thanks, remember Allah excessively and be mindful of Allah. The dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala literally means remembering Allah or being mindful of Allah, and this is in the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that should I not tell you something, more or less meaning, which is better than all your deeds, better than you giving gold and silver in the path of Allah, better than you fighting in the path of Allah in such a way, in a ferocious battle that people are smiting at your neck and you are killing them. Better than all of this is remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you are mindful of Allah. What does that mean? That these things, they are meaningless if they are not done for the sake of Allah, with the mindfulness of Allah. And this zikr of Allah, this remembrance of Allah, is something that a person should do all the time. In fact, even when we are sleeping, when we do it in a sunnah way, when we do it with the du'as that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us, and when we wake up, when we do those du'as that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has advised, then even our sleep is passed in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put no limit on. And being mindful of Allah is the biggest need of the slave who is eternally, entirely dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that through the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the hearts find peace. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so much, that so abundantly, so excessively, that people start calling you majnoon. People start calling you somebody who has lost their mind in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the meaning of udhkurullaha dhikran kathira. Remember Allah abundantly. Remember Allah, do the zikr of Allah, such a zikr that is kathira, that is excessive. وَسَبِّحُوهُ بُكْرَةً وَأَصِيلًا, and proclaim His purity at morn and eve. Do tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, chant the purity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. سَبِّحُوهُ بُكْرَةً وَأَصِيلًا. Bukratan wa asila would mean that do not give it up ever. Day in, day out, morning, evening, all the time. Remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala excessively. And this is, as I said already, that this is in relation to giving thanks to the Prophet upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when Allah has given such a bounty to you, Allah has done such a favor to you, then it merits that you lower your head and constantly be mindful and thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Huwa alladhi yusalli alaykum wa malaikatuh. Allah is so merciful, He is the one that He sends salawat upon you. Wa malaikatuh. Not only Him, but also He includes His angels in this job, that they also send salawat upon you. The salat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The salat of angels, the prayer of angels is that they ask Allah for forgiveness for the believers and ask Allah for elevation of status and showing mercy to the believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does that لِيُخْرِجَكُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ, so that Allah brings you out from all sorts of darknesses towards the nur, towards the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the light of guidance which takes you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَكَانَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَحِيمًا, and Allah is very merciful to the believers. And this is about, the ulama have said that this ayah says that if you remember Allah excessively, if you are mindful of Allah, if you have the fear and regard for Allah, Allah will always take care of you. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that remember Allah, ihfadillah, which means secure the memory of Allah, secure the mindfulness of Allah, Allah will protect you. Ihfadillah, remember Allah, be mindful of Allah, be careful about Allah, tajidhu tujahaka, you will find Allah right there in front of you. So therefore, this ayah also means the same thing more or less, that Allah takes care and protects the people who remember Allah, who are mindful of Allah. Those who care about the pleasures of Allah and stay away from those things that displease Allah, Allah takes care of them. Allah does not let them go into darknesses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not let them be misguided. This is the reason why we emphasize that a person who is teaching us deen or becoming a leader in deen, we have to look at their actions, their ibadat, their dhikr. This is the reason why we do not take anybody as our guide in deen if they do not remember Allah excessively, if they are not engaged in the zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is one of the conditions of finding a shaykh, that they should be mindful of Allah. They should do some zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Without the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are not qualified to be a leader or a teacher of deen. People think that we are PhDs, we are scholars, we are this, we are that. If they are lacking in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which includes prayer, which includes all sorts of worship, which includes obedience of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they are not qualified by any means to become leaders. They are not secure from being misguided, because Allah is saying that those people who remember Allah excessively, which first and foremost includes the ibadat, those people are those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes out of darknesses and leads them towards nur. So if we want to go towards nur, the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we have to be very careful about remembering Allah excessively, being mindful and being fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also follow the one who is who has the same properties, same features. If not, then we do not follow them. So in the world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this to the people who are mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects them from misguidance and keeps on leading them towards the ultimate nur, ultimate guidance. And then at the time of death, as some ulama and sahaba have said, or at the time when we meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Hashr or in Jannah, there is a hadith about all of these. There's reports from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about all of these. Tahiyyatuhum yawma yalqawnahu salam. Their greeting on the day when they will meet Him is salam. It is mentioned that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Jannah, Allah would Himself say Assalamu alaikum to the believers. It is also said that Malikul Maut, the angel of death, when he comes to extract the soul of a believer, the first message that he brings to the believer is that your Allah has said salam to you. Your Allah has said Assalamu alaikum to you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all among those. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Wa a'adda lahum ajran kareema. And not only salam, but Allah has prepared and promised for them a kareem reward, a endless reward that they never deserved, that they never truly earned, but Allah is Kareem. Allah has rewarded, Allah has prepared it, a noble reward. a very fulfilling reward. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us see that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from hellfire, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala secure us in this world and in the hereafter. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. آمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.